walking frame when I started out, when they used to have to move my legs for me. And my next 5K will be with the lady that was my physical therapist at this time. My next 5K, that will be this October. I'm making 5Ks a thing. That's not Gretchen. Who's pictured, I don't know her name. But that's, you want to talk about gut wrenching feeling.
Face this way when you're talking so they can hear you.
Feeling like you're at your rock bottom. I mean, your legs literally after a spinal cord injury feel like you have like weights attached to them. And after a spinal cord injury, it feels like you have weights attached to them. And then have drop foot, as you can see how my toes are dropping down. And my right ankle, as anyone watching me now, my right ankle's pointed up, but I also have a brace on. When I didn't have a brace on it, if I don't have a brace on, I've got paralysis in my right ankle to where I cannot move dorsiflex or plantar flex, pick up or push down on my right ankle. Therefore, I wear a brace on that. That makes things a little bit harder, but I I still drive normally, still everything normally, but it makes things that were simple before now a little complicated. But anyway, that was some of the drop foot stuff, and they're really working on form. They're really working on bending my legs, stuff like that. That was the walking frame. Here was after going over to the ozone and here was some of the personal training I did to do strengthening after a spinal cord injury, because knew it's going to need to do extra after all the bones I broke. Here's walking with arm crutches. Each day at inpatient rehab, I would start with getting medication in my arm, and then I would get medication pill form, and then would get coffee, and then go to occupational or speech therapy, occupational therapy, and then physical therapy, and then have a repeat of that afternoon. And that went on for 6 weeks. And on the weekends, my dad would come up. My mom stayed with me 24 hours a day, 5 days a week, throughout the week. My dad would come up on the weekends, and my dad would come up on the evenings and see me. And honestly, when I awoke from my accident, I woke one day and I opened my eyes, and all I could see was my dad up against the wall, and I turned over and all I could see was my mom up against was a nurse on the other side. And you want to talk about a disturbing feeling, and I couldn't put words together at the time, and it was a freaky feeling. And then the next time I awoke, I was being pushed around in a chair on trauma floor by my mom, and it felt like a nightmare was going on because I didn't know what happened. All I knew was I was in a hospital. I didn't know what happened. I was in internal fear. And then was transferred over to KU inpatient, where I worked tirelessly with therapists. This was at inpatient. That was type of what I was doing at inpatient. That went on for 6 weeks. Let me see about, here's that Ability KC. Here's the place I went to after inpatient. Here was after getting out of the chair, walking. Here was after being discharged from inpatient rehab. Here was and as you can see, my back was weak there, my core was weak there, my legs were weak there, my feet were weak there. I had to build back all strength in my entire body. I mean, it was all wiped out. It was completely all wiped out. And many thanks to Adam, he did greatly. He bared with me through a really tough emotional time through that time, because some of my therapists had to put up with me being a little bit emotional through some of those times, because some of this accident was an emotional roller coaster that was all over the place, and sometimes had to keep a level keel, but sometimes my therapist helped out with that when it be getting on the emotional roller coaster too much. Here's another thing that was doing at inpatient, or at Rehab Institute. You can see how weak my outer thigh muscles were, and how weak my leg muscles were there. You can see now I can go like this, so anyways, things like that. But there was, you know, it was like to go like that was like, now, but anyway, that was when I went to go out with a leg like that and wasn't able to move like before. That was a really freaky feeling, and that was a really scary feeling. That was a really scary feeling. Here was another thing that did a little bit of at Rehab Institute, and you can see a lot of things that had to. You learn a lot about yourself, and I mean, not only you learn a lot about yourself internally, you learn a lot about yourself externally too. I mean, I definitely had a unique walking pattern prior to my accident. After my accident was hard because prior to my accident I always stood with my knees locked. It was really hard after my accident to be standing with my knees unlocked, and it was really hard to be bending my knees and locked and not shuffling feet. And it was and the weight distribution. I mean, it's like learning to walk all over again. I mean, it's really and then got to
I video
and
all
then
those.
Here was at Minds Matter. This was where I worked the longest, was at Minds Matter. This was later on in therapy recovery, but I worked with Minds Matter for years, and I worked personal training and physical therapy both. I worked physical therapy at Minds Matter, and I worked personal training with the Ozone, Hayden Mercerman, personal trainer over there, and Danny Lopez were my personal trainers, and worked with them, and they really helped get me stronger and all fixed up and all back then. But that was backwards walking. Here was when went to go. There's a lot of fear and a lot of fear after a spinal cord injury when you go to walk again. Here was going to take step one after, and then that was when I saw my mom cry happy tears after taking step one. You can see I'm looking over at my mom now. I mean, you want to talk about, I mean, it was an all surreal feeling. I mean, it was like flying 2 different airplanes in one day prior to my accident, a Cessna and a Piper, and team up and rodeoing to laid up in a bed, not being able to get out of bed, but with the lift, and being placed in a chair by people that were around my age. It was really humiliating, and really cuts deep a little bit. Really cut deep at the time. It was but anyway. And then here's showing walking around the house and getting on the floor, and showing with
The dirty
floor, what able to do on the floor. You know, it's like after my accident recovery, able to but that was an example of how far I've come after where and then here was some of the extreme workouts started to put arms on the elliptical, things like that, and work core that way. That's a really disgusting position to be in after you've broken your back in 3 places on spinal cord injury, but it's not anything. But anyway, that was my accident recovery, and I got to the point to where let me find one of and here's motivational clip of things doing around the ranch and around the house now and on my jobs and things like that. Here's driving out to the pasture with the ranger to throw out a salt block and mineral block for the horses, and showing I can lift that up and toss that out after spinal cord injury and can still, even though do that different, even though I have to turn it around and place my back up against it, toss away. I've found ways around things.
So it's all jacked up.
Blame my Madre for the tailgate. That was
I fixed it.
a Madre thing. Yeah, as you can see, I found ways around things. It's not the traditional way, but it's ways that work. It's ways I found ways to make do and still continue on being progressive through life. And not everything has to be
You want me to keep
prime
rolling?
and perfect, but as
Okay,
long
that's what I
as
was gonna do.
making do and making doable and being progressive and being progressive. This one's, as you can see, my mom had the hose in and we were having some hose problems that day. But this happens to be the type of stuff you do out on jobs too, with loader and saw. Some of my clips have my mom filming me getting in and out of saw, because that's actually something that's really hard to do after a spinal cord injury. Get inside a skid loader with one of those loader saws on the front.
Oh shit. Now how does it pop out?
Anyway,
Can I pop my
that's
We don't need the volume on.
that's my accident recovery where I'm at now. I'm showing people progressive life clips. I'm showing people progressive living. I'm showing people that there's hope to depression, because I've also have fought depression to the point to where there was a point I was at rock bottom, and I don't want anyone sinking there in depression to the point to where they don't feel like there's any way out. I don't want anyone hitting that point. I also don't want anyone hitting the point in the recovery to where they are hitting the point to where they hit the depressed phase of going through the motions, because that was the depressed phase hit and recovery, and it was the depressed phase hit to where I was there, but I was going through the motions. I was still putting in all the work, but I was going through the motions. It was like I was there, but I wasn't, and it was don't want anyone fighting that. But anyway, that will be that. And thank you all. And thank you all.